So what would a bill or what size of a bill could we do and maintain our good credit ratings and I realize we're not going to go to that number, but what is that number? How big is it? I mean, historically, we've never gone beyond the billion, but my understanding is it's a pretty big number that we could reasonably afford as a state and protect and I think make investments. And so what would be that robust bill that you mentioned?
Well, Mr. Chair and Representative, the robust number is still, I'm not sure what that right number is. You know, one of the things that we've had a debt service guidelines in place since I think 2008, or it's been about 11 years. And we have three guidelines, and they're designed to measure how much debt we have outstanding or issued with respect to the total personal income in the state of Minnesota. We adopted that in part because that's a little bit how the rating agencies and other people look at the ability to pay of a state. Then our third guideline deals with paying off debt in a certain number of years versus other years. Now, we've analyzed the first two guidelines and come up with about a $3.5 billion debt that we could issue in 2020 and still not go beyond those debt capacity guidelines for guidelines 1 and 2. It would disrupt the payback period a little bit that we would have to work on. But that's sort of the outside number. I think one of the things that we were looking at, remember, the rating agencies examine us from this perspective too. So if you look at total state debt, the total state debt measured as a percentage of our state's total personal income, and our state's total personal income for this forecast is $354 billion a year. That represents, in Minnesota, a relatively small state income. We're right in the middle of the pack when it comes to other states in terms of our total state debt compared to total state personal income. If you look at the debt service, the amount we pay every year or every biennium as a percentage of the state revenue, that also is low. We're in the top 18 states when it comes to having low debt service compared to our general fund. So we're really in a spot where we don't believe we've been overly using bonding or borrowing as a way to invest. We think we've managed that fairly well. Clearly, there's a lot of differences. We have gone over $1 billion, by the way, several times. But the really key, I think, is deciding what we're comfortable with in terms of what should that annual debt payment be. But I think, and I talked about this on Thursday, and the governor, I think, really reiterated the same thing. We want to make sure that what's in it is what works for Minnesota. I mean, the key is what are the kinds of programs that really local communities or the University of Minnesota or Minnesota State or our water treatment facilities, what kind of investment overall will help the state continue to make progress? Because one of the things that we've been really good about in Minnesota is investing in the long term. We do that. We manage our budget in the long term. We try to manage our resources in the long term. And I think that's one of the things that the credit rating agencies looked at us and gave us a AAA rating, in part because of the ability of us to have a reserve, budget reserve, but also to take care of our infrastructure. In fact, if you refuse and don't really live up to what you should maintain in your infrastructure, credit rating agencies will start to look at that as a credit risk, because at some point things are going to fail and you're not going to be able to maintain those. So there are just so many areas where we can, around this state, help with leveraging the money, the assets that we have by borrowing and making those long-term investments. So the governor, as you know, has been traveling around as well, which is a little bit unusual, and very engaged and interested in what is the right bonding bill. We will release that on January the 15th. We're obviously working on it full-time now, trying to decide and present to him and the lieutenant governor what's that package look like, so that people around the state will go that this really is a bonding bill that fits all the Minnesotans around the state. So we're focusing on the nature of what's in the bonding bill, and you know, I don't know what that right number is yet, but I look forward to coming out and working with the governor with a number that serves the purpose that we need to engage in here. Thank you.
Representative Lilly, at the beginning of the meeting, I thought some questions about a capital investment bill might come up. And so at the last minute, I asked Mr. Marks to put together a few numbers, and I did express some of those thoughts with the commissioner. Just different scenarios, what the debt service would be. This committee doesn't deal with the projects, but we deal with the debt service. So, Mr. Marks, on the back of the envelope numbers that you have, if you could just share those with the committee, and then we can refine them later if necessary.
Well, Mr. Chair and members, these aren't exactly back of the envelope. These are numbers that MMB has supplied us, but
Well, let's be clear.
the forecast assumes a $755 million bonding bill in 2020 and then $240 million in 2021. And those are 10-year averages. There's nothing magic about them. They're what happened in the even year, the last 10 even years, it's the average of those numbers, and what happened in the last 10 odd years. So $755 million is what's built into the forecast for for the 2020 session bonding bill. Each additional $1 million in bonding in 2020 would cost about $16,000 in debt service in fiscal 2021 and about $127,000 in debt service in fiscal 22-23. Just to put that in perspective then, a $1 billion bill would cost an additional $3.9 million in 2021 and $31 million in 22-23. $1.5 billion bonding bill would cost an additional $11.9 million, and this is additional above the forecast, $11.9 million in 2021 and $94.4 million in 22-23. And a $2 billion bonding bill would cost $19.8 million in 2021 and $157.8 million in 22-23. And the 22-23 cost being much higher is a function of the timing on when the bonds are sold. And there's an assumption of no debt service in additional debt service cost in fiscal 2020 anymore. So it begins in fiscal 2021 and then ramps up in 22 and 23 as more bonds are sold.
And having spent a little time on the committee through the years, the type of projects and which ones are shovel-ready and all of that can influence those numbers as well, in terms of how quickly a project comes online. So obviously, when we get ready with the budget resolution, we'll add further discussion about the size of a bill, input from the governor's office, and also what we have available for resources.